Anton, please give us your perspectives on the global accounting profession.
Thank you very much, Laurie. Happy Halloween. I have never, ever introduced a speech that way. I am absolutely delighted to be here today. I should add, now this is personal, but I'll say it. I received a great honor at the end of last week to be appointed honorary professor at the University of Glasgow, one of the oldest universities in the world. And this is my first public address. I didn't tell you, though, that the subject was stand-up comedy. No, seriously, I am delighted to be here. This may not be a conventional speech in a traditional sense. You are not going to be inundated with slides that give you technical information. I am here to maybe tell a bit of a story and hopefully stir up something here that may impact you as regulators. I should say I was delighted to come here. I mentioned it to many of my friends that I was going to speak at the NASBA conference, and they were all saying, "We never knew you were into basketball." And then I said to them, "What kind of conference is it?" It says US regulators. And they said, "Where are they having it?" Disney World. And then he said, "What's the dress code?" Mickey Mouse. And I have to say, I think it's the NASBA has to be congratulated during tough times. It's lovely to hear you're an organization that loves fun, and I think that's very much embodied in the fact that you have come here during difficult times. And I have to say, this is probably the only conference I've ever been at when members, when they arrived, were given badges and tracking devices. My family did say to me, "You're going all the way across there to give a speech. How are you? Surely you're going to enjoy some of the benefits of Florida." I said, "I don't have a lot of time, but I have a plan." And the plan goes like this. I stand up at the podium. In the first 5 minutes, I call for the abolition of the National State Boards of Accounting in the United States, be forcibly removed from the auditorium, and can enjoy the rest of the time till my flight leaves tomorrow evening. But I thought probably that's it wouldn't be very, very kind to my hosts. Although, as a Scot, Scots have the tradition of being rather, let's just say, mean, but they appreciate hospitality. So on behalf of the 10 members of my family who've squeezed into my room at the hotel, I would like to say a very big thank you to NASBA for bringing me here. But you probably wonder, this Scottish accent. I mean, I was concerned that there may need to be simultaneous translation. Can you understand me? Some people say it's a lovely accent, the Scottish accent. In fact, there was a survey recently that said if you want to sell something, give it to a Scot, because the tone is very, very persuasive. Unfortunately, Sir David Tweedy, the president of the Institute, wasn't so persuasive with the SEC around about IFRS. But I am of Italian roots as well, and my uncle Luigi, he used to sell filofaxes to the mafia. He was involved in very organized crime. You're probably wondering, when is he going to get to the good bit? But I am of Scottish roots. I am a Scots-Italian with Irish blood living living in Scotland. Do you know what that heady brew creates? It actually creates a very, very passionate individual. And for those of you that know me or don't know me yet, I am a very, very passionate individual about the causes that I fight for, the responsibilities I have. And it is in the Scottish blood. There are 1% of the US population claim Scottish roots. How many here have Scottish roots? Wow. Do you know that 14% of all US millionaires are Scottish, of Scottish roots? So looking around here, I'm saying, what happened to you? But the thing about Scots, and I love it when I go around the world, they say, my family from Scotland. I said, fantastic. Where are they from? Don't know. But they go back 240 years. I'm like, God, how do you know that? Oh, I've researched it. Do you know the problem in Scotland? There's a swathe of the population who don't even know who their father is. But somehow the Americans, Scots, seem to be able to go back a considerable way. So well done to you. I was asked, and this will be the last Scottish part of the introduction. I saw some of you at the AICPA 125th anniversary, and for those who don't, I wore my very bright tartan trousers. Don't know if you remember. They did kind of clear the floor as I kind of walked into the room. And some people did say, did you not bring your trousers or your kilt with you for the event? And I said, no. I said, the problem with kilts and coming into the States is Homeland Security just do not look favorably on these huge pins that hold the kilts together. And it could catch a barracuda. And equally, the ski and do. The ski and do is the dagger that goes in your sock. They just don't get it when you try and explain it to them. So if anybody, save you asking, I did not bring a kilt, neither did I bring my tartan trousers. I should say now, coming to the title, when the letter came through saying, come and talk about riding the global cultural roller coaster, I thought, oh yeah, they only ask me that when we go to Disney. But as I took it apart, yeah, I could give you a perspective on the issues facing the global profession. I know Kevin, who's coming up next, is going to give a North American perspective from Canada. We've got Philip Johnson, your terrific leader of the profession in Europe. He'll give you a European perspective. I'm not going to go through the technical issues. I'm going to just hit a few headlines that may be slightly different and how the challenges are for the young men and women coming into the profession now. Are there highs and lows on this roller coaster journey? Yes, there are. You don't need me to rehearse them just now. I'm not a CA or a CP. I'm not an accountant. In fact, my background is in education. It's quite unusual. I was the national regulator for education for a number of years. I was responsible for all education standards in Scotland, and over many decades and centuries, I suspect Scotland had probably what is the most enviable education system in the world. And I was the standard setter there for many years. So I understand regulation. When I moved into the accounting profession, I started to understand regulation in that context as well, fairly quickly. But I was never trained in a firm. I don't have the designation. I didn't sit any accounting exams. I'm probably the only CEO I know in the world who actually teaches students, something I love doing. I teach ethics. I have tried accounting standards. It failed dismally. In fact, as it might even be described in religious terms as heresy. But I teach, so I have an interesting exposure to the young men and women coming into the profession. But coming from the outside, and there's so much going on. I joined the Institute 6 years ago, and this is before the crisis came. So see, when you come in, you get overwhelmed with information, technical data, issues. But what you do is you start to separate the wheat from the chaff and what is really, really important. I'm not going to talk about accounting standards and the turbulent journey that we've had recently. I've got Sir David Tweedy as my president just now. I see more of him than I do of my wife just now. And I've heard the same jokes 4 or 5 times a week, every week. And I think I must be the only CEO who's applied to his governing board for a grant for therapy at the end of a presidency. I may need to have some of his jokes surgically removed from my inner being, but it's been great working with him, a man of passion who believes in the profession, but also is passionate about international accounting standards. So I'm not going to talk about that, even though I could. I've learned a great deal from him. There's a great deal of issue around about auditing, and I'm not going to talk about auditing standards, but I'm going to say something later on about being an auditor. Is it an exciting time? I have never been more excited as the CEO of an institute as I am just now in my 6 years. Not because of what is going on in the world, because instead of what is happening actually in my own institute, which I'll share some of with you this morning. How important are accountants? So much, well, I'd say they're very important. So much so that 2 of my children are now considering the profession. And would it be an understatement to say since the middle of the 19th century, the accounting profession has probably been one of the most important and influential and significant professions since then. People have this stereotype of accountants and the profession. But I think I can fairly say, alongside many, who when you start to think about it realize the guardians of the truth have been the guardians of the effectiveness of the capital markets of the world and have lubricated them well over many, many years. Ladies and gentlemen, when the history is written of society in the 21st century, and there's much to be said, I mean, we've seen social, cultural, political, geographical change of dramatic proportions. And people ask who had the biggest influence. Some might say the bankers had a big influence at the latter stages of the beginning of this century. But I wonder, ladies and gentlemen, when all is said and done, how much people will say about the influence of the accounting profession. We have Jim Silf here with us from IFAC, another great man who works tirelessly for the profession. You'll hear from him later. But in IFAC, there are about 2.5 million members. It's a large profession, but there are millions of others in the high streets of most of the major cities in the world of unqualified accountants. When I speak of the profession, I'm talking about those that are affiliated with the International Federation. As Laurie said, in the Global Accounting Alliance, we have 800,000 members. That's not an insignificant profession. Of many cultures and languages. When the CEOs meet, it is a challenge. We have a teleconference once a month, and we meet face-to-face several times a year. Teleconferences can be a challenge. Language can be a challenge. It's a bit like language and culture can be a challenge. As I was just thinking about this coming over in the plane. The cultural language challenges. My favorite sport is football. You call it soccer. What you call football only touches the foot 1% of the entire game. In fact, less than 1%. What you call football, we call rugby, without the helmets and the padding and the manicures. But it does pose a challenge. Are we looking at what is probably the world's first global profession? The first. We talk about doctors and lawyers, the rest, but is this truly potentially going to be the first global profession? We have increasingly global standards. That's another story for another time, but one day we will, I'm sure, have global standards because that's inevitably where it will go when we sort out some of the politics of this and some of the vested interest potentially in some areas there. But I think that will be a challenge for us culturally, with many cultures and languages, to create one global profession. We're seeing increasing numbers of women coming into the profession. You might say, well, why would you mention that? Well, we've almost 50% of the intake into the student community of ICAS is women. But 2 years ago, I gave the opening address at a conference for the Russian Federation in Kazakhstan. It's the only time, I was delighted today when I received a pen when I came in as a speaker's gift. It's a wee bit presumptuous to give the speaker the gift before he's spoken, but I did appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. But when I spoke in Kazakhstan, the gift I received was a horse, a whip, and a hat, which was very, very interesting, I have to say. Transportation issues actually resulted in me refraining from accepting it, but I did offer it to the president to give to one of his children. But the point of the story is not that. When I spoke to the gathering, there were 450 people in the gathering. 97% of them were women. Women. Couldn't believe it. I thought it was in the women's branch of the Russian Federation. I said, so where are the men? They're here. I don't see them. Are they disguised? Mind you, some of them are, I need to be careful, cultural respect. But and I said, why are there so many women here? And they said, do you know why there's so many women here? It's because historically, it was a bookkeeping profession. Men did science, engineering, went to the military. Bookkeeping was for the women. Now, we know better. We do know, ladies, that you have a very dramatic influence on the profession, and increasingly so. But that is something that's changing recently. Every month we have our council meeting, and one of the things we do, and I will mention it again later, we stand up and honour the dead of the Institute since the last time we met. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing. We now read out the names that we've introduced us in the last 6 months rather than just go through the list. But almost inevitably when we stand up, the vast majority are men. It was a time when it was a male-dominated profession. Fortunately now, globally, it is not dominated by men. And as a profession, I think there are challenges here for the women. I do ask the question when I meet the global heads of the Big Four, how many female partners are there? How many female partners are there? How many women are there in the leadership team, with so many women coming through as students and looking for role models? Another challenge in the global debate is designations. I'll leave Kevin to talk about this one next. Some say, would it be great, Anton, if we were all called chartered accountants? I said, try that in America. Even although Scots were around about the foundation of the American Institute of CPAs, I do understand, as well as some English, and they were chartered accountants. But you have your own history. But we have ACCA, we have CPA here, but we have CPA in other parts of the world. We have the chartered accountant, we have ACA, FCA. This is a challenge that's become a commercial challenge, and it has become a challenge for the firms and for regulators. And in fact, it's become an industry in itself in terms of the recognition of designations. Will that change? Will there be one global designation? No, I don't think there will be. Why? Because I think there's something about national identity. I don't believe in the homogenizing of the profession. When I took the job as a CEO of ICAS, one of my first tasks was to address the IFAC conference, the annual every 4-year conference in Istanbul, because my predecessor was due to give it, and it was all about developing accounting profession. And they said, do you want to give it? I said, of course I do. So some of my lines there were just instinctive lines, but they've stuck with me actually over 6 years. And I believe strongly in national institutes. I believe it's part of the culture, the heart, the soul, the identity of a profession. I respectfully say to you, state boards and regulators, you cannot create a profession of yourselves. You can contribute significantly, in fact, very significantly, but there's something about creation of a heart and a soul in a profession that has to come from different ways, and I'll say a bit more about that later on. I would say one of the other challenges, and again, I'm not going to go into it, but you would expect me to say it here, I'd say the impact of regulation is having an effect on the profession. A negative effect as well. But that goes to the heart of what I believe is profession, which I'll come to later. And lastly, I want to end here, but some of the challenges we face is people don't want to be auditors. I don't know what it's like in the States. People don't want to be auditors. The young ones can't get out of audit fast enough. If my children are saying to me, Dad, what do you think about being an auditor? And I say, son, I've never been an auditor, daughter, never been an auditor. But I tell you, from the experience of what I hear and see, let's see how you can enjoy it, but it's going to be tough. I think this is one of the challenges, biggest challenges we'll face, apart from audit reform. You can have all the audit reform you want in the world, but if you've got no auditors to do it, it means nothing. And I think the big challenge will be making the audit profession, within the accounting profession, something very, very attractive. But let me say something about the young ones coming in. The challenge, the global challenge today. One of the things, and this is my experience now, but many of your parents will know this, the worsening attention span of young people. Okay, stick with me. I lost 4 of you. I saw 4 heads go down to a BlackBerry there when I just said that. This will be interesting. I'm watching the BlackBerry users just now. This is the old school teacher in me. I'm looking for eye contact, ladies and gentlemen. Eye contact, yeah. Yeah, okay, that's good. BlackBerry's just been subtly slipped away under a paper, yeah. Okay, recently I've noticed a disturbing trend. People's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. In fact, if you're like 85% of Americans under the age of 35, you lost interest after the words, recently I have noticed a disturbing trend. It is an epidemic problem. People now spell the words you and before, because they don't have the patience anymore. Can you remember, ladies and gentlemen, that day? Because some of us, it can be a very significant day. The day you used the letter U in a text or an email for the first time. Do you remember? Or maybe you've not done it yet. Well, I tell you, it could be quite a significant, quite a spiritual moment, actually, for some of you. Or when you reply in the speak of your children or even grandchildren. As the national regulator in education, I oversaw the national examination system. And we had a big debate. And I was a real traditionalist here. Would, in an English essay, you accept text speak? Is it legitimate English? Absolutely not. But would that convince the liberals? We say, this is the language of the children. Yeah, but I know the behavior of children as well, but it doesn't make it right. Now, I think this does have an impact, and there's a serious point here. Thanks to Facebook, we have all become conditioned to posting micro comments on people's walls. How many Facebook users here, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, good number. Okay, you understand micro comments. Some others are yet to be converted, but they're coming. According to the Facebook Code of Condensed Communication Conduct, otherwise known as the FCCC, micro comments must not exceed 24 characters. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, actually, I'd say it simply reflects what might be a change in communication over the last number of years. Now, say your family dog passed away after 18 years. And you decided to express your grief with a message to your friends. Here's the response that you would likely receive from one of your friends in 1970. Hey, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your dear golden retriever, Buster. I know that he was a family member to you. I hope that you can be heartened in your time of grief, knowing that he lived a good life. I hope you don't mind, but I baked you my homemade apple pie. I am always here for you. Now, this would have been handwritten. 20 years later, hey, email. So sorry to hear about the loss of your dog. What was his name? Anyway, imagine you're pretty bummed. Would love to talk more, but gotta go. Monica's soccer match. Can't be late. Full stop. 2012. Hey. Sad face. Ladies and gentlemen, at a time when we want more financial reporting, longer reports, people's concentration level has gone. At times we want auditors to say more, our young people say less. Audit report of the future. Happy face. Or Facebook speak. Ladies and gentlemen, I jest not. The line of travel here on this roller coaster is we don't want to read. We don't want to read too much. We don't want to say too much. People's concentration level is very low. Now, I'm saying this now because all the young people that we are all qualifying just now are in that category. They are different. They're learning differently and thinking differently. But let me tell you about one of the other challenges of young people today. Supermarket in the UK several weeks ago did a survey of 1,000 parents of children aged between 18 and 25 to coincide with the restart of college. This is what the survey found. 30% of 18 to 25-year-olds cannot boil an egg. 42% cannot iron a shirt. 35% cannot pay a bill. 18% have never touched a vacuum cleaner. 23% can't make a bed, and 50% can't use a tumble dryer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are your children. My children, much as though I work hard to change it, they are the young men and women who are coming into the profession. Very, very bright children for whom much is going to be entrusted to them. But it is change. I have to say, even in Scotland, this cultural change is affecting us greatly. Last year in the UK, 6.8 billion was spent in the beauty industry. Part of the increased growth was in Scotland, with a 75% increase in the male population. Tanning, waxing, and facial treatments. Ladies and gentlemen, the days of Braveheart are gone. They talked about a real Scotsman wears nothing under his kilt. Now if you look, you'll have waxed legs tanned in a fine bikini line. But what's the future, ladies and gentlemen? Several years ago, I went to visit my grandmother's grave in Glasgow. And I was coming out of the graveyard, I passed a gravestone. My eye caught it, much as though our eyes catch much that we don't consciously aware of. And on it was the letters, or the name, John McIntyre, CA. John McIntyre, CA. This was 2 years ago. I was doing a strategic review of ICAS and I was trying to figure out what is the future? What do we do differently? We've got the education right, we've got the regulation right, we've got the engagement with members, we've got a relationship with our stakeholders, we've got our thought leadership right. And I was ticking off another strategy that was going to take it to another level up over the next number of years, but I sat at those strategic meetings thinking, there's no soul here. We're doing what any other organization does. And I'm standing looking at this gravestone saying, John McIntyre, who were you? Did your family put those 2 letters there? Because they said that's what defined him. It's who he was. It's part of who he was as a man, father, husband, grandfather. Or did John McIntyre say, see, when I go, I want those 2 letters on my gravestone, not my degree, not the firm I worked for, not my bank balance, those 2 letters. The next week we had our council meeting. Now, I've been in the council 4 years, and I told you this, at the end of the meeting we stand up and we go through the list of names that died. I confess that for the 4 years previously, when it came to that point in the meeting, I stood respectfully, but I was more interested in any other business at the end of the meeting. But this time I looked. And it was the name, it was where they came from and the date they were admitted. And I went down the list, and it was all men. 4 of them were admitted to ICAS, before the Second World War. And they remained members to the day they died. And I'm still standing at this council meeting, and everybody had sat down. The president says, are you okay, Anton? And I said, and excuse my language here, I said, this is not a bloody trade association. This is a profession of men and women who, till the day they die, are members of that profession. It affects who they are, how they behave, how they think. It affects how they approach business, and it doesn't stop when they're no longer active in business or retired. It's who they are. And I said, we've lost it. We have lost it. It made sense to me. All the times I stood in front of the classes teaching, and these young people were just getting a qualification. They wanted to pass the exams. They wanted to fulfill their training contract. They wanted to get out into the world and make their real money. And I said, are we a profession? Are these young men and women learning to be a profession that to the day they die, they will say, I am a chartered accountant? Well, this has sparked a revolution in the last 2 years in ICAS. ICAS has always been a very respected institute, the oldest in the world. But I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we have taken it to a whole new level in terms of our heart and soul. We talk about ourselves as a profession now in ways that we never talked about ourselves. Next week, I have all the listed top FTSE 100 chairmen, CEOs, and CFOs for a private dinner. And you're going to hear some of what you're hearing tonight. You are our most high-profile leaders. You, ladies and gentlemen, have to be icons for a profession in such a way that there's nothing that will bring you shame and nothing that will bring this profession shame. And I want you to be role models. So these young men and women go, I didn't get a qualification. I became a professional. There's something about profession, ladies and gentlemen, that finds its origins in the Middle Ages with the monastic vows of the European monks. A profession was an oath or a promise. An oath or a promise. What promise has the accounting profession made? What promise has it made to society, any society in the world? What promise has it made? What promise? You're CPAs, many of you. What promise have you made? Remember when I was at the ICPA conference, Bob Bunting, must find this here. He gave a great speech. It's in our DNA to take our values and make payment on them. So that was a great line. It's in our DNA to take our values and make payment on them. But ladies and gentlemen, how are you making payment? You may be a regulator, but as a person, you may be a CPA. What's your promise? Now, I have to say, I'm not on a guilt trip here for anybody, because I've said the same in front of politicians all over the world now when I speak. Anybody who has a public position in civic life, who's privileged in education, privileged in wealth and responsibility, what's your promise to give back? And I think, ladies and gentlemen, the time is coming more and more for us, with the tens of thousands of young ones who are aspiring to be accountants, to say, here is your promise. There was a research piece done. I'll just find this in my notes as I come to the end. It's Dan Ariely. It's from MIT, and it's called Predictably Irrational. Now, I only discovered this recently, but I probably knew this instinctively. He did a research, and he got two groups of people to do a test. Have you heard this, Kevin? No? Yeah. And he said, one of you can cheat and one of you don't. So they did it. Some of them cheated. Then he did it again. And he said, one group of you, I want you to remember 10 books from high school. And he said, you guys there, I want you to try and remember some of the 10 Commandments. And he let them do it. At the end of it, all of them could cheat. The ones that did the high school books, some of them cheated. Those that did the 10 Commandments, nobody cheated. He didn't do anything different. Just something happened. Now, he said, okay, is this a religious thing? No, I'm going to step back from that. I'm a scientist here. He says, I'm going to do something different. So he said, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll let you guys 10 books from high school. And you guys here are going to write down the MIT code. And it says, I understand that this study falls under the MIT honor system. He then did the same exercise. Everybody who wrote down about the MIT honor system, nobody cheated, but somebody cheated the other way. Now, where he came to in all of this is, we need to find things that are so front of mind that affect people's ethical behavior. Now, I'm sorry I couldn't be at the event yesterday, the speech yesterday. I'm trying to find it. Raymond Johnson, what can your state do to reduce ethical problems? Well, what this guy's saying is the way you reduce ethical problems is you put something in front of people's minds that they didn't have before that will affect their behavior. Now, we've tried this in ICAS this year for the first time, and I don't know many institutes that do it. We've now said to all students who qualify, now, we take on 1,000 students. We're small beer compared to what goes on in your states. They are no longer qualifying or having graduation ceremonies. They're being admitted into the profession. And we now make them stand up. At the end of the ceremony, we had one recently with 1,000 there. We make them stand up. Some of you may do this in your own areas. We made them stand up, and for the first time we did it in public, and I will read it to you. I declare that I will conduct myself in a manner that maintains and enhances my own professional reputation, that of my fellow members, and ICAS. As a CA, I commit myself to acting in the public interest, and I will conduct myself with integrity, objectivity, and in accordance with the highest ethical standards of ICAS. Ladies and gentlemen, you could have heard a pin drop. The atmosphere was electric. But you know the other thing I did? I asked every CA in the auditorium, fathers, grandfathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, colleagues, to stand up also and say it in solidarity together as one profession. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you might say, well, that's nice. That is heart and soul. But I believe passionately, ladies and gentlemen, as regulators and as institutes and local institutes, we need to find a way of capturing again the heart and the soul of our members, particularly these young ones. The young ones have no sense of nobility of profession. Can we say that the accounting profession is a noble profession as a pillar in our society and societies anywhere in the world. Do you know when I say this in public, and I do say it a lot more, I've spoken to several thousand young people in the last few months, they'll almost always want to stand and say, I want it. I want it. Tell me what I do. What do I have to do to be part of this? And the challenge, ladies and gentlemen, is regulators can't do this on their own. You might want it, but you can't make it happen. There's a way in which I believe you should reflect on with the profession and the institutes and the firms. What does it mean to be a chartered accountant? And it's not enough to qualify. I've gone over by 1 minute. I'll just end with one story. I believe that in the firms, less time is spent with the young people than should be. They're not being apprenticed or might be discipled in the way they should be. The proportion of partner to young ones is growing. These young men and women need to be formed, shaped, and molded in character, ethics, and behavior, not just given a test or a textbook. I was speaking at an event last week, and this gentleman, his mid-70s, stood up and he said, Mr. Colella, he said, can you tell me what the training contract is for new students? And I said, well, it's just a contract. And he says, let me tell you what happened to me. I trained at a small firm in Glasgow in Scotland, and the partner brought me into the office, and he said, sit down, son. And he rolled out this big piece of paper. And on one side of it was the obligations of the firm to me, and what they were going to do for me. And the other side was my obligations to the firm and to do the right thing. And then he took a pair of scissors, and he cut a serrated cut all the way up through the middle. This is a man in his 70s. And he said, that's yours, and that's mine. And we're going to come back together in a few years' time, and we're going to put these together to say, did we fulfill our part in the bargain? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that for the young ones, and we all talk about the education, but these are real people. If we want them to be the best and to exemplify all that's best so that in 50 years' time people say the accounting profession was the most significant in the 21st century and beyond, we need to create this heart and soul in the young ones, and it needs to be rekindled in those who've been loyal, faithful members for many years, even into the retirement. So thank you all very much indeed for allowing me, my 10 family members, to come here these last 2 days. Thank you.